My name is Brian Pickering. I'm from IT Innovation, as Jacques said, which is part of the University of Southampton. What I would like to do in the next sort of 20 minutes is take you through the road mapping exercise that we've done in Infinity. And this has been specifically targeted at this time, as Per Blix mentioned, to be able to guide people who wish to use the infrastructures that are available, but also to provide some guidance and a checklist to public authorities. This is important for a bunch of reasons. This morning in the second plenary session, the idea was put forward that the FI-PPP, or part of the FI-PPP, is not about predicting or inventing the future, but providing the technology which will allow those, the SMEs, those with good ideas, etc., to start to build the future. But the second part of that, and we heard about an installation of the FireWare platform in Mexico, was that for the start of these, the innovators actually being able to use the technology of the FI-PPP, we would be looking for public investment. And so it's the Mexican public authorities at national level who have funded this installation. And so that's why this particular activity is very important. So I'll give you a little introduction to the roadmap. I'll let you know what happened over the period of Infinity to get to this stage, the methodology that we used and we're proposing, what the toolkit looks like and how to use it. So if you start off with the main stakeholders for the Infinity project, we have the FI-PPP projects themselves. There were 8 originally, and now there are 5 different ones. The vertical areas, the domains, if you like. The SMEs and individual experimenters who would wish to use the facilities. And what they need really is to find the appropriate resource. We'll talk about Zippy in a moment. As you will notice from my accent, I'm British, and so therefore I have different pronunciation to everybody here. But we'll talk about Zippy in a moment, which is this repository which contains all the infrastructures themselves. And so what these guys, these particular stakeholders need to do is to identify the infrastructure that they wish to use. The infrastructure owners, so those 230 or so members of that catalogue at present, need to know what it is that they have to offer and what they need to do to make their infrastructure available. And then finally we have the public authorities who will drive the investment and the ultimate utilisation of these infrastructures. What Infinity has done at various stages is to provide the tools and the capabilities to allow people to get this information. So as I say, the users, the FI-PPP projects, the SMEs, the individual experimenters, the innovators, have the repository where they will find the information. And all the information, of course, is subject to the data model, which will also be explained in a little while. The infrastructures have version 2 of this roadmap, which identified things like the particular issues and the challenges that they needed to address. And then finally, for those investing in these infrastructures in the future, we've provided this stakeholder toolkit. So Infinity within the FI-PPP is really a kind of support project which identifies the kinds of infrastructures which are available. We have collated information about them and analysed the data to make the infrastructures themselves easily mappable to the kinds of things in societal, in economic, and in technical terms that people will be looking for. And the roadmap specifically helps to identify the challenges for the ongoing sustainability of the infrastructures, allows the infrastructures to evolve so that they can meet those challenges and in fact become sustainable in their own right, and then finally to help stakeholders make decisions on which infrastructures are appropriate and also where they want to invest. So As far as this particular exercise is concerned, we went through 3 iterations. In December 2012, which was about a year into the project, June the following year, and then we are just finalising the final version of the roadmap. So to start off with, we were developing the overall methodology. What is the market that we're looking at? What is the market trying to support? What the challenges in those particular areas, as I said, technical, societal, economic, might involve. And then, of course, we had to start prioritising the challenges. The final exercise at that stage was to develop a plan on how this information would be made useful and how we would keep the information up to date as the market developed. The second iteration was really focusing on the challenges and the priorities we'd identified, but then to start building on top of that, to start making recommendations to those who would use the repository and to those who were looking to exploit the infrastructures. Then finally, the final iteration of refining the recommendations, plus to start to put together for key stakeholders the types of information that they need, how that aligns with Horizon 2020 and the objectives around innovation, excellent science, and also the support of industry, and then finally produce some forecasts of where we thought that the infrastructures would be going. So, we start off with market analysis to identify the characteristics of those infrastructures which seem to be successful, and those infrastructures which in the past, sometimes as the result, as an outcome of similar initiatives to the FI-PPP, had proved to be useful and gone on in various guises to be able to support this market. We wanted to identify the challenges, as I said, across various areas. What is it that the infrastructure needs to provide? And if you were in the data protection and security session just previously, the kinds of things which users and regulators are actually looking for from the infrastructures. Then to prioritize and plan where we go ahead. In the second iteration, we engaged directly with stakeholders to ask them, well, what is it that you need, and how is the information that we are providing currently able to help you and to help you identify what you need, but also to plan where you're going to go. This led, of course, to an update of the challenges involved and to the beginning of the definition, the initial stages of the definition of a process, which I'll show you in a moment. Then finally, within the FI-PPP, there are various different working groups. We work together quite closely with the Exploitation and Business Modelling Working Group. And then closer, a second iteration, you know, if anybody is familiar with agile development, for example, you go back to your stakeholders and you ask them again, okay, this is what we've done, where do we need to go now? And that led to a slight shift, a refinement in the characteristics which are associated with appropriate infrastructures, a modification, a further refinement of the challenges, and then the final iteration on the process. And now here we are to disseminate that information. If you go over to the Infinity stand, there is a 2-page version as the first dissemination exercise around this particular activity. And then there is, for those who ask interesting questions and ones that we can answer, a more detailed version of which we have a few copies. So, engagement with stakeholders, I've stressed on a couple of occasions. Over the lifetime of the Infinity project, we've organised 5 consultation events where we've brought together relevant people. The first one was in October 2011, which was a little early for us to react to. That was about data protection specifically, security, all about data handling. But then we start to get into the particular consultation boards which have started to shape our thinking and identify some of the challenges which I've alluded to. So the second consultation board was about security, identity and privacy, what the technology is doing, but more importantly, what the users expect and what they actually need. Again, in the previous session on privacy and data protection, there were sufficient examples there, specifically from ENISA, about how people take responsibility for their own data protection, but also what is needed from the technologies themselves. The third consultation board in November of that year, we looked at capacity building, so that's one of the things which Xi-Fi is responsible for. Pierre also mentioned that. Capacity building, building a federation of infrastructures which will support innovative activity. But more importantly, as far as this activity is concerned, i.e. this within Work Package 5 of Infinity, was looking at the life cycle of infrastructures. Infrastructures are not just there. They're set up and then they go through a few iterations to be able to promote adoption and take them further into a sustainable future. So that was very important for us in developing the methodology. The fourth consultation board was about adoption and the opportunities which we could identify for the infrastructures as they move forward. The fifth and final consultation board brought together a lot of different stakeholders and players within this field to identify what the opportunities might be and where the infrastructures would be best positioned for sustainability. And that comes back to why we're talking about public authorities and how they make their investment decisions. So, we developed a set of guidelines specifically with public authorities in mind. And just very briefly, you can all read, and also in the summary that's available on the stand, you will see the thinking behind the individual areas. And public authorities really need to decide what the overall strategy is, and that may be on a local, a regional, or a national level, or indeed pan-European, and make sure their investments are not some niche which is not part of that overall strategy. Public authorities need to focus on investments for infrastructures which are complementary to those that are already available commercially. And part of the reason for this is that commercial infrastructures will often compete directly with infrastructures and facilities which offer exactly the same capabilities. We need to look at the sustainability of the infrastructure, what plans are in place, and so therefore the public authority needs to ask that. We also need to look at governance. How is the infrastructure going to operate, and who is responsible for the various areas that the infrastructure covers? This is particularly important. I come back to data protection as we move towards the proposed regulation. And of course, a regulation is different from a directive because a regulation is then imposed on all the member states. Promotion of SME engagement. Okay, you have the pillar there in Horizon 2020. But these are the guys, the startups, the new companies, the small companies who invest in ideas and taking ideas quickly to the marketplace. They do not necessarily have the capacity to be able to invest in infrastructures. However, if we give them the information, they know the infrastructures that they can use, and they will start to innovate and produce the type of drag-on effect which will take the infrastructure into a sustainable position. The application of standards and open interfaces, and then the final guideline about providing middleware. Technology is moving very quickly, but we need to make sure that it is not closed. Any newcomers or anybody existing in the marketplace must be able to connect and bring new facilities. If you look at Xi-Fi, for example, what Xi-Fi is providing is the capability for for sensor networks, for example, for smart cities to connect to the infrastructures to gain access to them. And this is crucial for all the infrastructures that we're promoting. And then finally, this middleware layer will facilitate the operation of the infrastructures and also the access to the facilities that they provide. So these are the basic guidelines that we've put together for the public authorities in helping them make decisions on their investment. We've also generated a checklist which we've mapped back to the challenges that we've identified, but also to some of the areas that the Exploitation and Business Modelling Working Group have come up with. There's a list of 56 different questions. You've got some examples here. These are things which, once the public authority knows the infrastructure or infrastructures that they wish to invest in, then they can start shaking the tree, as it were, and saying, well, what do you do about this? Do you have a clearly defined offering? And if you have an offering, who is that geared towards? And do you provide a tailored offering for different people who are in this marketplace? The overall structure, and I apologise for the quality of this slide. I did come across the channel, so it did get a bit wet. But if you look at the different stages of infrastructures, and this is going back to the point about life cycle, as an infrastructure is set up, then there are different issues and challenges which they must look at. And specifically, we identified areas like, what are they doing about protection and misuse? What are they doing about the selection of appropriate business models, given the area that they're at? And that may look at gap analysis, etc. And then finally, in this specific area, what are they doing about getting users involved? And as you go through the different stages, so you can identify different challenges to take the infrastructure and the planners, the owners, the operators of the infrastructure to the next stage. But the important thing is that the challenges are different at the individual stages, which is why the life cycle is important, and also why it's important to look at how the challenges map into the different stages. So how do we use the toolkit? What I showed you before with the initialization of an infrastructure going through to commercialization through different stages is what we call the infrastructure transition model. So we provided this as a guidance along with the rationale behind it. We have a challenge matrix to identify what the challenges are. And as I said before, this has been through various iterations with different stakeholders to identify what the real issues are. And then a set of 56 questions, as I've said. The checklist for engagement directly with an individual infrastructure or set of infrastructures to be the kinds of questions you're asking. Do you provide this? Do you provide that? And so finally, along with the repository, Zippy, we have this set of guidelines for the roadmap. And then, of course, there are other sources that you can use. So step one is all about where is the infrastructure on this transition model and what are the priorities that it needs to deal with. Then we need to identify the relevant questions or the relevant issues which need to be addressed by the infrastructure and will provide the public authority with information upon which to develop their own business plans and their investment plans. And then finally, out of all of this will help both parties. It's not just about the investor, although the investor and the sponsor are very important, but to help both parties to identify how to move forward and what the sustainability status is of the infrastructure. And so finally, Infinity, in this particular area, has developed this roadmap and a set of tools for public authorities to be able to assess the sustainability of the infrastructures they're interested in, but also to guide their investment decisions. The roadmap, the guidelines within the roadmap provides a high-level definition of what's motivating the investment and what requirements will satisfy or should at least be identified to support that investment. The toolkit provides an instrument, so a set of stages, a set of guides as to what to do to be able to arrive at appropriate investment decisions. And then the toolkit specifically highlights issues around impact. What is the impact going to be, or what is the planned impact of the investment in this infrastructure? how third parties can be engaged and what the role is in moving forward, how openness is provided by the infrastructure to bring these third parties in, and then finally, an assessment of the sustainability capabilities that the technology offers and where it will go in the future. So all of these components together form the roadmap, and the idea, the essential target is now for guiding and providing some information to help in investment decisions. Okay, so questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Brian.